Ladies and gentlemen, it is every gaming YouTuber's favorite time of the year, E3 season, where we all get to sit down and cash in for some easy views. And so I thought, hey, why not get in on the action and maybe present a perspective that's a little bit different than what you'll see on other channels, maybe a little bit more skeptical, maybe a little bit more old school. At least that's the flavor that I'm shooting for. And so I mostly decided to make this video in response to the surprise announcement at the very end of the event. The announcement that is such a surprise that I actually didn't even know it happened until people started messaging me about it. And so I thought, hey, it might be worthwhile to get the word out to the small demographic of people who also care. And while I'm at it, I also thought it'd be worthwhile to poke some fun at E3 and the gaming journalists and also the larger gaming industry as a whole, because for the most part I tend to not have that much interest in the larger studio games. And it's not because I'm a hipster or I'm trying to be cute or edgy or anything like that. It's just because this style of gameplay does not interest me all that much. I find it boring and tedious, and I'm not a story-based guy. I don't really get into gaming for those reasons. I'm much more focused on playing arcade-style genres where you're playing for score, you're playing for skill. The game is difficult, it's not holding your hand, there's no tutorials, there's no waiting around, there's no microtransactions, there's no in-game rewards, no, none of that. The only reward you get is high scores and the satisfaction of winning and being a badass, basically. That's the type of gaming that I enjoy, and so for the most part, whenever these big gaming expos come around, whether it's E3 or the PS4 one or the Xbox one or the Nintendo one, I'm usually not all that aware of them or all that interested. And so just a fair warning as we go through this video, and I probably insult the game that you like or that you are really into, just beware, this isn't Maximilian Dude's channel. I'm not trying to be hype here, and just take it for granted that if it's a game that isn't an arcade style genre, I probably am not going to like it. But as I watch through the presentation highlights, of course, there's no way in hell I would ever sit through the actual presentations. As I look through the highlights and look through the list of games that were presented, I thought it might be fun to get my takes on some of the games that stood out to me. Most of them I'm probably going to just ignore, but here are some personal highlights of mine, whether ones that annoyed me or ones that stood out to me as pretty cool. So the first one that stood out to me is Metal Slug Tactics. This was the one that will probably be the closest to an arcade thing that you're gonna get, just because Metal Slug, for those who do not know, is a legendary arcade IP. The Metal Slug games are absolutely fantastic run and gun shooters. My favorite run and gun shooters, in fact. And so this isn't a real Metal Slug game in the sense that it is a run and gun, but at the same time, I do kind of like tactical RPGs. I have a little bit of a soft spot for them, and it is kind of cool what they're pulling off here, so I will probably check it out. If not to play it all that much, at least for the novelty of covering it on the channel, because Metal Slug is an IP that I do enjoy, and I wouldn't really find this as too disrespectful. It feels more like they were sitting around and thinking, all right, we have this Metal Slug IP. We don't actually want to develop a run and gun that 12 people will buy. Why don't we make a tactical RPG? You know, I think that was kind of the thought process there. I'm not a real stickler for spin-offs or whatever, so I'll take a look at it. Along those same lines, another tactical RPG that was announced and getting a lot of attention is the Advanced Wars re-bootcamp, or whatever it's called, the remake of the first two Advanced Wars games. And I have to say, I am a huge fan of the Advanced Wars franchise. I have played through all the games before this. I do enjoy them a lot. I'm not a big person for RPGs, as I've mentioned before, but a really simple, straightforward tactical RPG can get me, whether it's Advanced Wars or Fire Emblem. And I would say Advanced Wars is my favorite. But when I saw this remake and I looked at the graphical presentation, that was a real thumbs down for me. The thing is, for me, I cannot stand this style of graphics. Please stop doing this, game studios, please. What they do is they take games that have really crisp, clean, well done pixel art, and if they want to make 3D models, if they want to try and up-res it and make it more modern or whatever you call it, that's fine. But then they swap in these Pixar nightmare intern style graphics that look like hell. I cannot stand this style of graphical presentation. And I'm the type of person, if the graphics aren't right, I'm not going to buy it. I'm not going to do it, especially if it's a remake or remaster, because there's not a whole lot of reason to play an uglier version of the game when you have perfectly fine access to the earlier versions of the game, whether it's through playing them on the GBA or emulating them, as I have no problem doing. And so I really wish they would have taken a different direction with this thing, rather than trying to remake all the graphics to look like toy soldiers or whatever it's supposed to look like. I really wish they would have just brought over the original graphics, brought over all that stuff, and maybe worked on adding in some extra features like M2 will do. So they add in an extra campaign or add in extra missions, add in online versus multiplayer. I know that's a big thing. People used to play online versus multiplayer in emulators against people in the game. And then also add in some new soundtracks. I don't think just remaking the graphics just because it's a lot of work gives the game extra value. That's like me trying to do a shot-for-shot remake of The Godfather with my camera equipment here. Sure, I can do it, but is that going to be as quality as the original presentation? I wouldn't say so. So I say that even though I do love the Advance Wars franchise, I would definitely pass on this because the graphics look like hell. And please, someone stop these types of remakes being done, because I think they just look awful, and I don't get why you would do that. Why not just port the game over and add in some extras? Maybe even like touch up the graphics a little bit here and there, but to add in maybe add in some cutscenes or whatever, that's fine. But I don't know, to swap in this ugly Lego style, I'm not a fan of it, unfortunately. So up next, we have a game that I think is going to surprise people as a standout to me, because I saw this game pretty heavily memed on. It also isn't the type of game that tends to fall in my sphere of knowledge, but I'm talking about the Final Fantasy Stranger in Paradise game. I'm actually kind of interested in this game coming out, mostly because it is made by Team Ninja, and Team Ninja are probably my favorite studio working these days. I'm a huge fan of the Ninja Gaiden franchise. It's my favorite modern 3D game franchise, and I've also liked their recent output like Neo. I'm a big fan of Neo, and of course the Dead or Alive series. I thought Dead or Alive 6 got an unfair reception. Sure, it wasn't perfect, but it's actually a really well done game and my favorite in the series. So I think Team Ninja has been on a hot streak as of late. I was seeing the gameplay of this. It looks kind of like a watered down version of Neo, unfortunately, but with the Final Fantasy elements mixed in there. I've been thinking about maybe trying out a Final Fantasy game one of these days, and so this might be the closest that I will get, because it is real-time combat. I can't do that sort of semi-real-time combat like they have in Final Fantasy VII Remake. I did play that for a little bit, but I can't really sustain interest all that long, because it does end up being a lot of menuing and all that sort of thing, and that's not really what I'm into. So I am interested in checking this out, mostly as a sort of watered down Neo, but Team Ninja are really excellent at level design, are excellent at boss fight, and so this could be a sleeper thing that most people are memeing on now because it's cheesy, and I'm sure the story sucks, and I embrace that. I hope the story sucks. I hope it is cheesy as hell. I hope it has ladies in risque outfits that anger certain demographics. I hope it has all of that, because that's sort of Team Ninja's MO, and I'm all about that. So I'm interested in checking it out, despite the memes and people saying the story's stupid or whatever. So up next, we can pretty much sort of just go over all the first-person shooters that came out. I looked through all of them. None of them really stood out to me. Maybe the Fear sequel. I can't remember what it was, but it's like Stealth or something. I can't remember, but the Fear sequel might be the one that's sort of interesting. But other than that, the other, first-person shooters, arena shooters, battle royale stuff, none of that. I don't like that style of first-person shooter at all. I am a fan of the recent Doom games, but for the most part, modern FPS don't really appeal to me all that much. My favorite FPS, for those who are interested, is Devil Daggers. That one's super interesting because it feels like an arcade game and an FPS mashed together. It's actually really excellent. But for the most part, I'm not all that interested in first-person shooters. So Halo and all that sort of thing, not really doing it for me. And after that, I feel the need to leave a little bit of a comment on a panel that was presented that I think will go down in E3 history, though for probably reasons that weren't all that intended. Of course, I'm talking about the diversity and inclusion HR training panel that they decided to put on. A little bit of a glimpse of the corporate boardroom set on the main stage for us lowly gamers to take witness in. And, there's some great quotes going on in there.
All of that work, and with the support of corporations like Take-Two, corporations like Take-Two, corporations like Take-Two, corporations like Take-Two, corporations like Take-Two.
and the great things I'm sure that will become memes for time and eternity. But with that being said, I'm actually really glad they decided to put on this panel, because there's an issue with diversity and representation that I'm growing concerned with, and I'm sure many of my fellow gamers are growing concerned with as well. And I think it's important for us to be able to have an open dialogue and be able to express our concerns without judgment or without feeling like we can't speak up. And of course, the concern that has been on my mind for quite a long time is the diminishing number of hot babes being presented in our video games. Is it just me? Growing crusade against our video game vixens, are they being shamed out of their developer given assets? That's something that I'm concerned about, and I'm really glad that they had this panel. And on the next one, I'm really hoping that I can actually get a slot on the panel and bring this up with everyone, because I'm sure if people think about this and awareness grows and we get the donations where they need to go, I'm sure we'll be able to see more representation of hot women in small outfits. I think that's something that... So I want to end with a discussion of the Nintendo Direct, because as I have learned from the internet today, Nintendo saved E3. This event was on the border. It could have been a total failure, but luckily, right at the end, Nintendo came in, saved the day. Miyamoto in shining armor gave us exactly what we needed, and so thanks to this presentation, E3 went from a failure to a success, and that's a heartwarming story that I think we all can get behind. So, standouts from the Nintendo Direct. I already talked about Advanced Wars, not a big fan of that. Anything else coming to mind? RPGs and stuff like that. Mario Party. WarioWare looked pretty interesting. I do have the GameCube version. I did think that was a lot of fun, and a few times my friends would come over, we would play it. Though I don't think I ever got the full experience, because I'm pretty sure the game was meant to be played while you're on psychedelics, but nonetheless, it is a pretty cool franchise. I probably won't actually get around to playing it, but I could see myself picking it up if the price comes down low enough. And then, of course, the big kahuna that everyone talks about is the Legend of Zelda Game & Watch, right? That's what everyone's talking. No, the Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild 2 or whatever it's going to be. The thing about it is, I don't really think I'm allowed to criticize Breath of the Wild, because pretty much everyone on Earth seems to like that game. I don't hate it or anything, but it's not something that's going to move me deeply or anything like that. So, for the most part, at the end of the day, I thought, okay, this pretty much was a wash. Then, of course, there was Metroid Dread, and I have to say, just judging by the gameplay, it looked kind of like... I guess a safe way to say it is, I think the smaller indie studios, the people making stuff like Hollow Knight and Cyber Shadow, those types of games, I think they, at this point, have probably surpassed these smaller studios that Nintendo are hiring in terms of actual game design and level design. It didn't look like a great Metroid game, and I am a huge Metroid fan, and so it might be okay, but it didn't look all that impressive, to be honest, so I'm not holding my breath there. And so all in all, I walked away thinking, okay, that was a pretty underwhelming few hours of research. But then people started messaging me, and this is the real reason I made this video, is that apparently on the Japanese E3 stream or something like that, it was announced that Mushihime-sama is now available on the Nintendo Switch. Mushihime-sama, for those who don't know, is an excellent cave shmup, and I'm a huge fan of cave games. I'm a huge fan of Mushi. I think I've purchased that game 3 or 4 times now, but it's coming out on the Switch. I think the Switch version will be all right in terms of performance. I think if you want the best performance, it's probably still going to be the Steam version in terms of input lag and all that sort of stuff. But at the same time, being able to play it on handheld and also having it be more accessible to people who probably wouldn't buy it otherwise, because people do like to buy shmups on the Switch, is pretty cool. And then later in the year, they're going to bring DFK to the Switch, and they're going to bring Espgaluda 2 to the Switch. The reason why I'm excited for this is not because I can't play these games, because I already can on both the 360 and Steam, but because I think this is a good sign for Cave getting their feet back into the game as far as bringing more ports to consoles like the PS4, like the Switch. I would love to see them make their way to the PS4. I'd love to see them bring other ports to modern systems, like an updated Dodonpachi, for example. And so I think this is actually the good news that people are keeping an eye out for. And I think, yeah. So E3, at the very last minute, surprised me with some actual cool news, which is Mushihime-sama on the Switch. Other than that, though, I don't think there's too many things that I'm excited about, unfortunately. But I hope you all enjoyed my recap. I'm sure you all learned a lot and are wiser for it. Adios. So thank you to the $5 patrons, 172 PCT Water, Adam Pearson, Ukshay Wadker, Dingo, Andy Cap, Another Joe, Anthony A, Aaron Solis, B. Reality, Ben Win, Borgie22, Brian Reboot, Brian Shiver, Chris Yuzefovich, Chronic Burnout 3, Choreo, Danielle Savage, Delta Tango 6, Disco Stas Leia, Eric H, Frank Carter, Full Set, Retro Schmupper, Geriatric Donmaku, Hausu, Ilya, Kiwi, JLab, JB RPG, Joe Angelo, John Kelly, Gameboy Gru, K, K2, Kiko Man 589, Larridge, Malaise, Mark Toms, Maz, Meher Kalendrian, Minong, Queen Charlene, Nathaniel Davis, and Electron, Neon Dagger Games, Okla Kugels, Philip Mason, Portal 63, Raul, Real Skeen, Sketchy Raccoon, SLW, The Boot Rex, The Real Ikuzo, TRM, Zugumo, Yishi, Plasmo, and Utsukaya. Thanks for watching.